Kofi's mind swirled with fury and fear. He couldn't. No, he wouldn't accept this. He could feel the pull of the river, stronger now than ever before. But there was no turning back. He had to fight. He had to resist. With shaking hands, Kofi reached into his pocket, pulling out the charm his mother had given him. It was a simple talisman, a symbol of protection. But now, in the face of Zola's power, it felt useless. "I won't let you take me," Kofi shouted, his voice hoarse with defiance. His heart pounded in his chest as the river's pull grew stronger, threatening to drag him under. Zola's laughter echoed around him. It was not the laughter of a witch, but of something older, something more powerful. "You cannot escape the river, Kofi," she said, her voice like the wind through the trees, ancient and unyielding. "You are already part of it." Before Kofi could react, the ground beneath him shifted. The water began to churn violently, the current growing stronger as if the river itself were alive. Kofi's feet slipped in the mud as the water licked at his legs, pulling him closer to the edge. The ritual was reaching its peak, the air thick with magic, and Kofi, despite his defiance, knew deep down that he was already lost. The river had claimed him, just as it had claimed his brother before him. He could feel it, the water tugging at him, drawing him closer to its dark depths. The river's call was not just a physical pull, it was a pull on his very soul. With one final scream, Kofi was pulled into the water, swallowed by the river's depths. His body disappeared beneath the surface, his fate sealed. And so, the river claimed another soul, and the witch's grip on the village tightened. Zola had been by the river for as long as anyone could remember. The villagers had long since grown, accustomed to her presence, but no one dared to speak openly of the witch who walked the river's edge. She was a mystery, a shadow, tied to the water in ways the villagers couldn't comprehend. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was a beauty that brought unease. Her unkempt hair flowed like the river itself, wild and free, and her eyes, those eyes, seemed to carry the weight of generations. Yet, despite the stories that swirled around her, no one truly knew her, and no one had ever dared ask. As time passed, the land around Amari began to change. The crops that had once thrived began to wither under the heat of an unrelenting sun. The livestock, once strong and healthy, grew sick and weak, and at night, the cries of children echoed through the village, their restless dreams filled with nightmares. Whispers began to spread, quiet at first but growing louder with each passing season. The elders spoke of it in hushed voices, exchanging knowing glances when the name Zola was mentioned. "Her power is growing," they muttered. "The river is restless, and Zola is no longer content with just being a witch." Kofi heard these whispers often, but he never gave them much thought. There were always rumors in the village, always someone looking for someone to blame. But as the years passed and the strange occurrences continued to mount, even Kofi couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease that seemed to hang over Amari. The villagers grew fearful, yet they never acted. They feared Zola, but more than that, they feared what might happen if they dared to question her. In the quiet of his home, Kofi recalled the warnings his mother had given him when he was younger. He could still hear her voice, low and trembling, as she urged him to stay away from the river. "Do not go near her," his mother had said, her eyes wide with fear. "Do not offer her anything, not your hair, not your soul. The river is a place of power, and Zola is no ordinary witch." Kofi had always dismissed his mother's warnings, seeing them as the stories of an older generation, fearful of what they didn't understand. But now, as the village slipped further into chaos, he found himself haunted by those words. Could it be true? Was Zola really responsible for the misfortune that plagued them? His brother, Kwame, had always been the adventurous one. The night, Zola's rituals had intensified. Kwame had disappeared. The village searched high and low, but there was no trace of him, no body, no sign, nothing. Just the river, calm as ever, its waters hiding whatever secret it had claimed. Kofi could still feel the hollow ache in his chest when he thought of Kwame. He had never seen his brother's body, never seen him laid, to rest. The river had taken him, and the witch had taken him too. Kofi refused to believe the village's whispers, that Zola had played a part in his disappearance. But deep inside, a growing fear gnawed at him. Could it be that Zola had some dark power over the river? Was she to blame for the tragedies that had befallen their family? The river's call echoed through the air, a deep rumbling sound that stirred the souls of the villagers as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows over the water. The village of Amari seemed to hold its breath. Tonight, the air felt heavy, too heavy. The river, a source of life and death, whispered secrets to those willing to listen. And those secrets were about to be revealed. Kofi stood at the edge of the crowd, eyes fixed on the ritual unfolding before him. His body tensed as he watched the river witch, Zola, standing calmly at the water's edge, her arms raised to the sky. At her feet, a bundle of hair lay in the shadows, the strands gleaming in the fading light. The hair was a symbol, a token of something darker. Each strand, each lock, was part of a deal the villagers had long accepted. But Kofi could feel something was wrong tonight. His heart raced as an uneasy feeling settled in his chest. The air hummed with a strange energy, and Kofi couldn't tear his eyes away. The witch's voice cut through the silence, rising in an eerie chant that echoed across the water. Her words were not meant for human ears. They carried the weight of ancient power, stirring something deep within him. The pull was undeniable. It was as though the river itself was calling to him, beckoning him to join its current. A shiver ran down Kofi's spine as the crowd fell silent, their eyes fixed on the witch. Then, a voice from the back of the crowd whispered, trembling with fear. "She isn't just a witch. She controls us." The voice quivered. "She holds the power to shape our fates." The murmur of agreement spread like wildfire. Kofi's mind raced as he thought of his brother, Kwame, who had disappeared 2 years ago. The village had searched for him, but the river had swallowed him whole, leaving no trace behind. Was Zola behind his disappearance? Was this ritual connected to his brother's fate? Doubts that had lingered in Kofi's mind now consumed him. The uneasy feeling grew stronger. The witch's chant grew louder, filling the air with dark energy. Kofi's eyes flicked back to the bundle of hair at her feet. It was not just hair. It was something more. Something that held the key to the village's secrets. Something that tied their lives to the river's flow. The hair, Kofi knew, was a symbol of their willingness to surrender. Each lock belonged to someone, and with it, a piece of their soul. But what did Zola do with the hair? What did she collect? And why? Determined to uncover the truth, Kofi stepped forward. His heart pounded as he pushed through the crowd, moving closer to the witch. Every step felt like a decision, each one pulling him deeper into the mystery that had haunted his family for so long. Zola's head turned slowly as Kofi approached, her eyes gleaming in the moonlight. The ritual did not pause. Her chant continued, growing louder, more powerful. She did not speak, but there was an undeniable awareness in her gaze, as if she had been waiting for him to take the step that would change everything. Kofi's voice broke through the ritual's hold. "What are you doing with the hair?" he demanded, his words sharp with urgency. What power do you hold over the villagers? Zola's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. She did not answer him immediately. Instead, she lifted her hands and gestured toward the water, the current swirling beneath her command. The witch's voice, soft yet full of ancient power, rose once again. "The hair is only a part of the offering," she murmured, her voice as fluid as the river itself. "It holds more than just memories. It holds desires, fears, and blood. You cannot understand yet." Kofi's heart raced. His brother, his family, the village. Was it all part of this twisted ritual? He pressed on, his desperation clear. "But my brother?" Kofi's voice trembled, raw with grief and anger. "Where is he? What have you done to him?" Zola's eyes flicked toward the river. Her gaze was not one of malice, but something deeper, something older. "Your brother made his choice long ago," she said softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. "The river has claimed him, but he is not lost. He is with me now." Kofi stepped back, his breath catching in his throat. His mind raced. No, it couldn't be true. His brother, was he dead? Was he a part of this twisted magic? Zola's lips parted in a faint, cryptic smile. "Not dead, but not alive either. His soul is woven into the fabric of this river, just as yours will be." A gasp spread through the crowd, echoing like a collective breath held in fear. Kofi's chest tightened. He had come for answers, but the truth was more terrible than he could have imagined. The river did not just claim souls. It shaped them. It twisted them. And Zola, the river witch, was the one who controlled it all. Driven by a need for answers, Kofi had tried to confront Zola many times. Each time she seemed to vanish into the shadows before he could speak to her. She was always just out of reach, as if the very air around her repelled him. He would catch a glimpse of her figure at the edge of the river, and when he rushed forward, she would disappear, slipping into the trees like a ghost. It was maddening. Every time he tried to confront her, Zola seemed to test his resolve. Why wouldn't she face him? What was she hiding? What was she afraid of? The village, too, had begun to change. There was a growing sense of superstition, of fear that ran deep beneath the surface. The villagers had begun offering their hair to Zola, a silent, desperate plea for protection or favor. They would give her a lock of hair, believing it would secure their futures, their wishes, their safety. Kofi had watched this with growing unease. Hair. It seemed harmless enough, but something about it didn't sit right with him. "What does she do with it?" he had asked one of the elders, his voice thick with suspicion. "Why is she taking our hair?" The elder had lowered his eyes, avoiding Kofi's gaze. "The river demands a price, my child. We all must give something in return for its blessings." But Kofi wasn't so easily convinced. He had seen the way Zola's eyes glinted when she accepted the hair. It wasn't a simple exchange of goods. There was something more, something darker. What if the hair wasn't just a token of tribute? What if it was a key to something far more sinister? Determined to uncover the truth, Kofi set out for the river once more, his heart pounding with urgency. The pull to confront Zola was undeniable. His feet moved quickly, and though fear gnawed at his gut, it was overshadowed by the hunger for answers. As Kofi neared the river, he could feel the weight of the air around him, thick with magic and mystery. There was a gathering. The villagers stood in a circle, offering their hair, waiting for Zola's blessing. Kofi pushed through the crowd, his eyes fixed on the witch at the center. Zola stood tall, her presence commanding, her gaze unfathomable. She held the hair in her hands, weaving it into something, a dark, pulsing braid that seemed to hum with power. Kofi's pulse quickened. What was she doing with it? What was the ritual? "Zola," Kofi called, his voice cutting through the ritual's chant. He couldn't keep quiet any longer. "What are you doing with the hair? What is this power you hold over the village?" For a long moment, Zola didn't answer. She simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then her lips curled into a smile, the kind of smile that made Kofi's blood run cold. "The hair is but a part of the offering," she said softly, her voice like the river itself, ancient, calm, and yet filled with hidden depths. "It holds memories, desires, and blood. You cannot understand yet." Kofi's breath caught in his throat. Memories, desires, blood. The hair was more than a simple offering. It was a vessel, a container. But for what? His mind spun with questions, but before he could speak again, his heart stopped. He saw something in her eyes, a flicker of understanding. It was as if she had known he would come, as if she had been waiting for this moment, "My brother," Kofi whispered, his voice cracking. "What have you done to him?" Zola's gaze flicked toward the river, and for a brief moment, Kofi thought he saw something like sorrow in her eyes. "Your brother made his choice long ago," she said softly. "The river has claimed him, but he is not lost. He is with me now." Kofi's body went cold. "No," he whispered, stepping back. "No, he's not dead?" Zola's smile widened, and Kofi felt a chill run down his spine. "Not dead, but not alive either. His soul is woven into the fabric of this river, just as yours will be." The words hit him like a blow. His brother, his soul. Was he lost forever? The ritual around them grew louder, the villagers murmuring. But all Kofi could hear was the sound of the river, the whispering current. His brother's soul was trapped there, and now he was next. Kofi's hand went to his pocket, where his mother's charm lay, a charm that had always kept him safe, but in that moment, it felt powerless. "I won't let you take me," Kofi said, his voice trembling with anger and fear. Zola's eyes flashed, and the air around them grew thick with power. Her laugh echoed, dark and knowing. "You cannot escape the river, Kofi. You are already part of it." Before Kofi could react, the ground beneath him shifted. The water began to swirl and churn, the river pulling at him with a strength he could not resist. And in that moment, Kofi understood. The river had claimed him, just as it had claimed his brother. With a final scream, Kofi was pulled into the depths of the river, his body swallowed whole by the water's dark embrace. And the village of Amari would continue, unaware of the price it had paid, unaware of the river's power over them all, unable to stand by any longer. Kofi made his way toward the river's edge. His heart pounded in his chest as he walked through the gathering, his mind set on one thing: answers. Zola had taken enough from his family, from his village, and from him. His brother's disappearance, the whispers of magic, the constant unease. He could no longer turn away. He had to face the river witch. His steps quickened as he approached the water. The villagers' murmurs faded behind him, but his eyes were fixed on Zola. She stood tall, an enigmatic figure by the river, her presence commanding, as if she controlled the very land around her. No one had dared challenge her before. But tonight, it would be different. Tonight, Kofi would demand answers. Tonight, he would find his brother, or die trying. Zola's piercing gaze met his, and Kofi felt the weight of it. It was as if she had known he would come, as if she was always watching, waiting for him, to make this choice. Her eyes didn't blink, and Kofi's every movement felt under scrutiny. Each time Kofi approached her in the past, it was as though Zola was always a step ahead. He'd felt her eyes follow him, her presence lingering in the shadows, testing his resolve. Tonight was no different, but the tension between them seemed thicker, more suffocating. Kofi's determination burned brighter with every step. He was not leaving until he had answers. The air felt heavy with something more than the night's humidity. The river, too, seemed to shift. Its water darker, its current stronger. Kofi could feel it. A pull, an energy that threatened to overwhelm him. His muscles tensed, every sense on edge. Something was brewing. Something more than the ritual before him. Zola's chant began to rise, a low hum that seemed to vibrate in the air, carried by the current. Kofi watched as she moved with fluid grace, each motion part of the ritual she had performed countless times before. But tonight, there was a sense of urgency, of purpose in her movements. The bundle of hair, at her feet, strands taken from the women of the village, was no longer just a token. Zola was weaving it into something darker. The braid began to pulse in the moonlight, glowing faintly with an eerie, unnatural light. The energy around them thickened, the river swelling as if in response to her magic. Kofi's heart raced. This was no ordinary ritual. What was Zola doing with the hair? Why had she asked for it from the villagers? The strands were symbols of something deeper, something tied to the river's power. Kofi could not stand by any longer. He stepped into the circle formed by the villagers, pushing forward with resolve. He didn't care that they stared, their eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. His brother had vanished into the river, and now Zola was using their hair to weave some dark power. He wouldn't let it continue. "What are you doing with the hair?" Kofi's voice rang out, cutting through the chant. "What do you want from the village? Why are you taking everything?" Zola's eyes never left him. The chant did not falter as she slowly turned to face him, her face shadowed under her wild hair, her lips parted, a small knowing smile curling at the corners. "The hair is but a part of the offering," she said, her voice calm yet thick with power. "It holds memories, desires, and blood. You cannot understand yet, but you will." Kofi's pulse quickened. The hair wasn't just a tribute. It was something far darker, something that held more than mere offerings, memories, desires, and blood. What did it mean? What was she collecting, and for what purpose? Kofi's thoughts raced. His brother, Kwame, the disappearance, the whispers about Zola. He had to know the truth. He stepped forward, closer to Zola, his voice trembling with urgency. "My brother!" Kofi pressed, desperate. "Where is he? What did you do to him?" Zola's eyes flicked toward the river. There was something in her gaze, something ancient, something that told Kofi that the river had claimed more than just water and land. It had claimed lives. It had claimed souls. "Your brother made his choice long ago," Zola murmured, Thea, words carrying the weight of 1,000 years. "The river has claimed him, but he is not lost. He is with me now." Kofi's heart dropped. No, this wasn't possible. His brother couldn't be gone. He had to know where he was. He had to bring him back. "No!" Kofi whispered, stepping back. His body was cold, his thoughts scattered. "He is not dead?" Zola's smile widened, her voice cold, ancient. "Not dead, but not alive either. His soul is woven into the fabric of this river, just as yours will be." A gasp rippled through the gathered villagers. Kofi felt their fear wash over him, but it did little to calm his own panic. His brother, his soul, was gone, taken by the river, claimed by Zola. Was there no escape? Kofi turned toward the river, His fists clenched. He had to resist. He couldn't let this be the end. Not for him. Not for his brother. His hand reached into his pocket, where his mother's charm had always kept him safe. But as he pulled it out now, it felt like nothing. No power. Nothing to stop the river's pull. "I won't let you take me," Kofi said, his voice shaking with resolve. "I'll fight you." Zola's laughter echoed, a sound that made the air grow colder. "You cannot fight what you do not understand. Kofi, you are already part of it." Before Kofi could even react, the ground beneath him trembled. The water began to churn, rising up in violent waves, as if the river itself had come alive. The pull was immediate, stronger than anything he had felt before. He felt himself being dragged, his feet slipping in the mud. The air grew thick with the river's power, a force beyond his control. The villagers stood frozen, watching as Kofi fought the river's hold. But there was nothing he could do. The water had already claimed him. The river had awakened, and Kofi was its next offering. The water surged violently, its force pulling at Kofi's feet. He fought against the current, but it was like trying to hold back the storm. The river had awakened, and now it was determined to claim him. His muscles burned with effort as he dug his feet into the muddy bank. But the water was relentless. It lapped at his legs, then rose higher, pulling him deeper. The river seemed alive, an untamable force that could not be reasoned with. Around him, the village women shrieked, their cries echoing through the air as they stepped back in fear. Their feet moved swiftly, retreating from the water's wrath. Kofi could hear them muttering prayers, their voices trembling as they looked on helplessly. But Zola stood firm. She was unshaken, her feet planted on the ground as if the river's fury had no hold on her. She remained calm, unflinching, while the chaos swirled around them. The villagers feared her, but Kofi's fear had taken a different shape. It wasn't just her power he feared. It was the river itself. "You cannot fight it!" Zola's voice cut through the panic. It was soft, almost too soft for the storm around them. "The river does not bend to your will, Kofi. It is beyond your understanding." Her words sliced through the air, their weight sinking deep into his chest. Kofi knew the river was powerful, but to hear it from Zola, to hear that he couldn't win, that no one could, his heart dropped. The river had always been a part of their lives, a force they respected. But it had never felt like this, never so alive, never so dangerous. "Tell me about the souls you control," Kofi demanded, his voice rough with a mix of fear and defiance. His body shook from the struggle against the river, but his eyes never left Zola. "What are you doing with them?" Zola's eyes flickered, and for a moment Kofi thought he saw something else, something deeper, beneath the surface. She stepped closer to him, her presence as imposing as the river itself. Her voice lowered, the words carrying a weight that made Kofi's heart race. "The river is a keeper of hearts and souls," she said, each word deliberate, as if the weight of centuries rested on them. "It collects desires, fears, sins. It is not just water, Kofi. It is a force that shapes everything it touches. The hair you and your people give. It is the key to unlocking these forces." Fi's mind reeled. Hair. The hair. They had given Zola the hair that had seemed like a simple offering, was now tied to something much darker. The villagers had always feared the river's magic, but now Kofi understood. The river wasn't just a place of life and death. It was a collector. It took, but it also shaped. And the price? The price was far higher than anyone had imagined. The river responded to Zola's words, its currents intensifying, its roar growing louder. Kofi felt the pull again, stronger this time. The ground beneath him seemed to shift, as if the river's very heart was beating beneath his feet. He fought harder, planting his feet, trying to resist, But the water was too powerful. It didn't just pull at him. It dragged him inch by inch toward its depths. His hand reached into his pocket, feeling the small charm his mother had given him. He had carried it with him through everything. It had kept him safe. But as he grasped it now, he felt the charm's power slip away. It was nothing against the river's force. No magic, no charm could stop the pull of the water. It was too much, too powerful, too old. With every ounce of strength he had left, Kofi shouted, "I won't let you claim me!" His voice cracked, filled with a desperation that could not be ignored. He had come this far, fought so hard. He wouldn't be swallowed by the river. Not like his brother. Not like this. Zola's laugh rang through the air. It was not the sound of a woman, but something deeper, older. Like the river itself. It echoed through the trees, through the very earth, until it vibrated in Kofi's bones. "You cannot escape, Kofi. The river has already claimed you." Her voice was calm, certain, as though the battle had already been decided long ago. And in that moment, Kofi realized the truth. The river was not a place. It was a force. It could not be fought. It could only be accepted or destroyed. And the river was eternal. It could not be destroyed. With a final desperate scream, Kofi was pulled into the depths of the river, swallowed by its dark, endless embrace. His body disappeared beneath the surface, and the water closed over him, claiming him as it had claimed so many before. The village, the women, the river, they would continue. Zola's grip would remain, unbroken, and Kofi, like his brother before him, would never return. The river had taken its prize. Kofi woke, the cold water rushing around him. His eyes opened to darkness. The silence was broken only by whispers, faint murmurs that seemed to echo from every corner of the abyss. He reached out, his hands touching nothing but water. Panic set in as he realized the depth of the darkness. This wasn't just the river. He wasn't floating on its surface. He was submerged in it, trapped in its depths. It was as if the river had swallowed him whole, and now he was part of it, its pulse, its current, its very being. A shadow appeared before him, moving within the darkness. Kofi's heart skipped. It was a face, his brother's face, but distorted, stretched in ways that made it unrecognizable. The eyes, wide and filled with pain, were the same as Kwame's, but they no longer held life. They were eyes that had seen too much, that had been pulled too deep. Kofi's breath hitched. "Kwame," his voice was a whisper, a desperate plea in the drowning silence. "What has happened to you?" His brother's face, twisted in agony, seemed to look at him, but there was no recognition in the eyes. Kwame's mouth opened, but no words came. Kofi reached out, his hands trembling, desperate to touch his brother, to feel something solid. But Kwame, or what remained of him, remained just out of reach. "Please," Kofi called again, his voice breaking. "We can fight this. We can find a way out." The distorted image of his brother shook its head slowly, a sorrowful gesture that made Kofi's heart tighten. "There is no escape," Kwame's figure whispered, though no sound came from his lips. "The river owns us now." Kofi stepped back, his mind racing. He couldn't accept this. Not like this. His brother. His brother was lost. But Kofi would not accept defeat. Not yet. "No!" Kofi shouted, his voice filled with raw determination. "I will not stay here. I will fight. We can escape. I refuse to be trapped by this river." The shadow of his brother began to fade, swallowed back into the darkness. But Kofi's fury only grew. He couldn't, he wouldn't believe the river had claimed them. He couldn't accept that this was the end. With every ounce of strength he had left, Kofi turned to face the river's swirling current. The water, black and deep, seemed to laugh at him, its pull growing stronger with every step he took. The current roared as it dragged at him, pulling his feet from beneath him. Each step forward was met with the force of the river, its power relentless, unyielding. Kofi gritted his teeth, struggling against the pull. He knew it was futile, but he could not stop. He could not give in. He had to fight. He had to get out. "Let me go!" he shouted, his voice desperate as he stumbled against the water's grip. But the current would not relent. It twisted around, his body tugging him toward the center of the river, pulling him deeper into its grasp. From the darkness, a voice cut through the chaos. "You cannot escape," the voice said, low and soft. It was Zola. Her presence loomed over him like a shadow, even though he could not see her. "You are already part of the river, Kofi. The river does not let go." Kofi's breath caught in his throat. Her words echoed in his mind. The river does not let go. He had heard the stories, the warnings. But now, in the grip of the water, he understood. This wasn't just about the river. This was about his soul. And Zola was the keeper. "No!" Kofi shouted, his voice hoarse from the struggle. "I don't belong to you. I don't belong to this river." But Zola's laughter rippled through the air, low and haunting. "You are already mine," she said, her words slipping into the very water that surrounded him. "And now, you will learn the lesson of the river." The pull of the river grew stronger, the darkness closing in around him. Kofi's arms burned as he fought to stay afloat, but the water pressed harder, dragging him down, pulling him deeper. Zola's voice drifted through the water once more. "You think you can resist the river's power, but you cannot. The river shapes the soul, Kofi. It shapes desires, fears, sins, and now it will shape yours." The words wrapped around him like chains. The river wasn't just a force of nature, it was a force that could change everything. It shaped the very essence of those who came to it, binding them to its will. Kofi's heart raced. He had come to the river seeking answers, but now he understood. This wasn't about answers. It was about control, and the river controlled everything. Kofi's hand fumbled at his side, grasping for the charm his mother had given him. It had always been his lifeline, his protection. But now, as he pulled it from his pocket, it felt useless. The power of the river overwhelmed it, like a flickering light against the storm. The charm, his only hope, was nothing in the face of the river's wrath. "No," Kofi whispered, his voice weak but filled with defiance. "I won't let you take me." But Zola's voice was the final blow. "You cannot fight what you do not understand, Kofi," she said, her voice soft, as if she were offering him a final cruel lesson. "You are already part of it, and now you will learn." Kofi's final cry was drowned by the roar of the river. His body was pulled under, swallowed whole by the darkness. The river had claimed him, just as it had claimed his brother, and there was no escape, no turning back. The water closed over him, and the river's grip tightened, and so Kofi was lost, his soul now part of the river's endless current, as Zola's power continued to reign. Kofi's journey had taken him deeper than he ever expected. With each step toward the river, he had sought answers. Answers about the strange rituals, about his brother's disappearance, about the power Zola wielded. But now, as the waters pulled him deeper, the truth was no longer just something to uncover. It was something to understand. The river was not just a force. It was a reflection, a mirror of choices, of paths walked and decisions made. The deeper Kofi was pulled. The more he realized that this river did not just collect souls. It shaped them. It shaped everything. The questions Kofi had asked, where was his brother, what had happened to him, and why, felt almost trivial now. Some truths, he realized, were too complex to be answered. The mysteries of life, the things that plagued him, were not meant to be solved with simple answers. Some things could never be explained. Some questions had no resolution, no conclusion that made sense. The river was one of those mysteries. Its power was beyond him, beyond any understanding he could grasp. The river, once a symbol of life and death, now revealed itself as something far more intricate. Kofi could feel it in his bones. The river was not merely a collector of souls. It was a mirror to the very essence of those who came to it. It reflected their choices, their desires, their weaknesses. The pull Kofi had felt when he first approached the water was not simply a force of nature. It was a result of his own choices. Every step he had taken had led him here, to the river, to this moment. The river wasn't taking him. It was shaping him, shaping everyone who came near it. As he drifted deeper into the river's grasp, he could see it clearly. The villagers. They walked their lives unaware of the silent power that lingered over them. They continued with their rituals, offering their hair, seeking favor, seeking protection from a power they didn't understand. They didn't know the true nature of the river. They didn't realize that their choices were already shaping their fates. Kofi could see now that they were as bound to the river as he was. The river didn't just take. It guided. It directed. It shaped. In the moments before the river pulled him under, Kofi grasped the truth. The river's power was not in taking souls. It was in shaping them. The essence of a person, their desires, their fears, their very soul. All of it was shaped by the river. It shaped him. It had shaped his brother. It had shaped the entire village. The river was not a place of escape. It was a place where paths converged, where choices were made, and where there was no turning back. Kofi's mind raced. There was no escape. He had walked this path, chosen this journey. He had come to the river, and now it had claimed him, just as it claimed his brother before him. There was no escaping the pull, no avoiding the consequences. The river had already decided. It had shaped his fate the moment he made the choice to seek answers. His body trembled with the realization. The truth was clear now. There was no escape, not for him, nor for those who had chosen the river's path before him. The choices they had made, the choices they would continue to make. There was no turning back. The river had shaped them, and it would continue to shape them until there was nothing left. As Kofi's spirit began to fade into the river's depths, he understood the lesson. The river had never been about death or loss. It had been about choices, about how those choices shaped the very souls of those who came to it. And now, as his spirit joined his brother's, Kofi knew the river's true lesson. Life was made up of choices, and those choices had consequences. Sometimes there was no turning back. The river had claimed him, just as it would claim others. It would always be there, shaping the souls of those who chose to walk its path. The water closed over him, and Kofi was lost. The river's grip tightened, and its lesson was complete. The river, forever shaping those who sought it, forever claiming what had been chosen,